Hey, Figuring It Out family. Thank you so much for joining me for another exciting episode. Today, we're going to be talking about role reversals in marriage when she is the breadwinner. My guest today is currently based in New York, but she has worked in Jordan, in the UK, in Uganda, as well as where she's currently based now in New York. She's been married for the last 23 years, is a mother to two, and has a career that spans over 17 years and is currently serving as a senior director of human resources with an organization that has over 22,000 employees. My guest today is called Julie Muyengye, a very special lady. I will tell you why once we get into the episode. Julie, thank you so much for joining me for this episode. It is so exciting to have you here. Please say hi to our audience.
Thank you very much, Aggie. It's a joy and delight to join you today. I'm humbled that you could reach out to me for this interview. I know Aggie from way back in school, so it's nice to see how you've evolved and how God is using your giftings in amazing ways. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Julie. This is, it's so special that we know each other from school because I was so stubborn. But I was always secretly looking up to you. You lived your life with such poise and confidence and elegance, and you were just such a lady. And it is so special for me to have this full circle moment and have this conversation with you. Really, really special. You have absolutely no idea.
Thank you, Aggie.
And by the way, you're one of the reasons why I ended up giving my life to Christ, because I always thought this lady and Faith, there was another girl called Faith. I was like, there's something so special. And the more I dug, the more I found out that it was Jesus. Okay, enough of the detour.
Enough.
Yeah. I always love to start my episodes with an icebreaker. And given the topic that we're going to be discussing, I thought let's play a little bit of role reversal roulette. So imagine you were to switch roles with your husband for a week. What is the one thing that you would really love about that switch, and what is the other thing that you would really dislike?
Interesting question. I'll start with what I dislike. I would dislike gardening. Yeah. The joke in the family is I kill plants.
Okay.
And he's gifted. Hannington is gifted with his hands. He does the gardening, and we've got a fair bit of garden. So I would dislike that piece. What I would enjoy is spending more time with our children. Our daughter is going through choice of college visits. And because my husband is not fully working as intensely as I am, he's able to spend that time with her to take her for college tours. And I feel there are times that I feel I'm missing out on that piece of her life.
I feel you on the missing out on your kid's life. Yeah. But I'm sure part of your pillow talk revolves around how that went. So you're kept in the loop.
Mm-hmm.
Julie, I guess my opening question would be to go back to the time when you were a little girl and you were single and you were dreaming about what marriage would look like.
Mm.
What was that picture like for you?
Wow. Yes, I was clear in my head that I was going to get married to a believer. I became a believer at the age of 11 years. And so I am deeply privileged to having been raised with church and getting to know Christ. It became deeper and more meaningful as I grew. So the journey of faith was always clear to me. I knew I wanted to be a mother. I thought mother of four because I was born in a family of four. Then I moved on to mother of one because at some point I'm like, this is too intense and I want a career. And, by God's grace, I ended up being mother of two. What else? I viewed myself as a traditional wife in the family setup. Interestingly, my mom was a working mom. And at some point, my father retired and my mom was the main breadwinner. So I saw that played out and modeled from a very young age. But I found homemaking and the traditional role of the wife very appealing to me. So in my head, it was going to be very traditional. And God threw some surprises our way. So, yeah.
Wow. So then you got married, and tell us about the first bit of your marriage and your roles before the swap happened.
So it was a traditional setup where the husband is the main breadwinner. Hannington, my husband, worked with a radio station. He's an engineer by training. So he was CEO of Power FM, a local Christian station in Uganda. He went on to work with the BBC and the UN. And I too had a full career, and I worked and enjoyed my job. What was interesting was that 3 months into our marriage, I left to study. I got a scholarship, left Hannington in Uganda, went off to study. And that year was an important lesson for us because our marriage was put under so much strain that when we came back together, we said, looking back, if we had to do it all over again, we probably would make slightly different choices. And interestingly, that was God preparing us for what was to come. Mm-hmm. So I went on, had a full career of work. And then into my work life, Hannington got a scholarship to study abroad for his graduate school. And so at that point, we packed up. We had a 1-year-old son. I was pregnant with our second and moved as a family. So the 1 year apart had prepared us for this time because then we decided that we were not going to live apart. The amount of strain it had placed on our family was so great. And then we didn't even have children when I went to study. This time we had children. I was expecting a second. And so for the next 4.5 years as a stay-home mom, I look back and those were the greatest of my years. Challenging, and we can talk about it down the road, but as a stay-home mom for 4.5 years, and then went back into the workforce, still with Hannington at the lead. Then in 2013, I was posted to the Middle East for a role. There was a family duty station, and that's when the big flip, as it's called, happened.
So just before we moved to you being posted somewhere else, what was the strain like, in that 1 year when you are apart from each other? Help us to touch and feel that a little bit.
Yeah. So that's a great question because ultimately families will make choices and I don't hold judgment. I know it's complicated. It's not black and white. But I also know that God has called us in marriage and distinctively says that husband and wives really should keep it together, right? Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for the church. But in submission and in loving, there's something about being together. I can't be submitting to you. Submitting remotely is easier than submitting in person to some extent. And I think the strain, even with our children, the strain was that when I came back home, I had evolved into a slightly different person. I was very independent. I didn't have accountability on where am I, what am I doing, dinner, mealtime, whatever meal. I was a student. I could just have a cup of tea and that was fine. So there's a level of accountability coming together, intimacy, physical intimacy, that you're living apart. You can't be physically intimate in two different continents. And the vulnerability that comes from being a newlywed, leaving and cleaving, the husband, the wife, leaves their family to come together so that they can become one. So there was that strain, and that was an important learning for us moving forward.
Do you feel like your conversations evolved while you are apart? Because it was special when you got a chance to speak, right? Do you think that gave you some kind of advantage? You probably had longer phone calls or...
There's an English saying, distance makes the heart grow fonder. I don't understand that statement, to be honest. Because if you think about the friends that you had and they're now apart, you make the effort. You call them, you send text messages, you send voice notes. It's not the same. And there's some relationships that will still remain intact. There are those special friends who, time and space doesn't impact as much. But on the whole, especially under the marriage covenant, there's something about physical presence and physical joys and fights and disagreement that I can watch your face, I can read your body in ways that the phone and other technologies just might take away. So
where were we from a technology perspective? We didn't have things like video calls and all of that fun stuff.
We had a bit of that because that was 2002. It wasn't as advanced, but at least it wasn't the expensive phone call. that
Yeah.
people in the 70s and 80s and 90s went through. It was more affordable. And Hannington came to visit me once in the 1 year that I was away, and that was special. But it was still, looking back in hindsight, it was by God's grace that we were protected and our marriage was able to thrive and go through that without scars. But that was very hard.
Thank you for sharing that. So then you get this posting, and what is going through your mind? How did you and Hannington have the conversation around, okay, this looks good, it's going to work for both of us, it means sacrifice X, Y, and Z, but we're going to do it anyway?
Yeah. So the starting point was by 2013, we had already contracted, for lack of a better word, on what the non-negotiables were. We knew that anything longer than 6 months, we would uproot as a family. And when we shared with a few trusted friends, they'd laugh. They'd be like, you guys can't live apart from each other for 6 months. You guys are hilarious. And our response was, we're in a covenant relationship. And we have 2 children. We have 2 nations that God has entrusted to us. What are we going to do about these nations? Ordinarily, you will see the pursuit, the economic pursuit, to build wealth to pass on to children, right?
Yeah.
But if you haven't invested in the children that you're passing the wealth on to, yes, you will pass on wealth, but to who?
Yeah.
Character formation. Those things take both parents.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this lightly, because there's some for whom it's single parenting. And I have deep respect and sensitivity to that. And that sometimes, even with single parents, God will raise an uncle, an auntie, a grandparent to come alongside and support in that journey. But if you think about a single parent that doesn't have that additional support, it's a very lonely, difficult journey. So there was non-negotiables. And so when the opportunity came, and Hannington's graduate study actually was not a compound, it was a scholarship for one. And we dug in and we said, oh, we're coming as a family. We will live off one stipend. And we did, because usually the stipends are generous and you learn to live within your means, you kick back and you pull back and you're able to make it work. And so come 2013, when I was deployed to Jordan, the conversation was much easier because we had decided that we would move as a family. It was a 1-year assignment, and everybody we talked to said, no, you guys, this doesn't make any sense. Hannington has a great job. He's doing really well in his job. Julie, you can go for a year and come back.
Yeah.
And said, no, we are going as a family because we're in a covenant relationship and because we want to continue raising the children together. So it was an easier conversation, but we also prayed. And I tell people, if you think about the Lord's Prayer, it says, give us this day our daily bread. God has daily bread for us. He has a new, fresh word every day. And if you're walking closely with the shepherd, and you can tell the shepherd's voice about your own, because the challenge with opportunities is they're exciting.
Yeah.
You look at the package, you think about the ego that comes with this new assignment and the exposure and the experience, and you're passionate about your world. And it's very difficult at that point to truly hear the voice of the shepherd. It assumes that you are abiding in the vine. And so in that journey, we spoke to a few trusted people that prayed alongside us. And we asked God for a scripture. We said, what is the scripture you're giving us to hold on to? And God has a scripture for each one of us that we can use as a foundation. And so for us, the scripture that kind of was important and remains our pivotal scripture is 1 Corinthians 9:8. It says, and God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that you always, having all sufficiency in all things, may have an abundance for every good work. And if you read the Message version, it says, so that you're ready for anything and everything, more than just ready to do what needs to be done. And so in stepping into this opportunity in faith, we had no idea what we were stepping into. We didn't know what the work opportunities would unfold for Hannington or not. We didn't know how our children would take to life in the Middle East. But we knew that God had said he was going to make all grace abound to us. And that's the scripture that has been our foundation since then, 2013 onwards. And that's where we continue to build our lives.
So you go to Jordan. First of all, I want to say that it's so commendable how you describe this journey, because God being at the center of it, trusted friends that are also strong believers being involved in this for me sounds very, very safe, very grounded, very admirable. So now you're in Jordan, and how does that play out? Julie is going to work every day, and what is Hannington doing?
That's a great question. Hannington was, so Julie's going to work, and Julie is on 65% deployment. So I was deployed to support the Syria response, as it was called. And so I'd been deployment Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey 65% of my time, meaning I was barely home. And so if you think about the full 9 years, getting kids ready for school, Tendo was 9. Tendo's our son, who's now turning 20 soon. Ayinza's turning 18. So Tendo was 9 at the time. Ayinza was 7 at the time. So he was doing preps for school, school activities, sports, dance, parent-teacher meetings, cooking, cleaning, dropping kids off for play dates. He helped out with the soccer group as a coach. And then 8 months into that, he got a consultancy with the UN. And so in addition to work, he kept that going. And that was hard, because Hannington is a very traditional African man. I think what was a blessing for him is he was raised with several sisters and by a single mother. Dad died at the age of 14. And so he learned to cook and to clean and to wash and to have conversations and engage at an emotional level the way women typically would, right? And so there are things that a typical man may struggle with that Hannington was able, God prepared him for that. And so he was able to do that. I remember calling him once, and he was having a very difficult day. And he's like, I don't think I can do this. I said, what's wrong? He's like, I was trying to hold Ayinza's hair. So Ayinza, our daughter, had like a big African afro. And he was trying to just like gather the hair together as easily as a woman would, because for us, it's easy. You grab the hair, you get a band. And he's like, the hair keeps slipping out from the sides. I'm like, what do you mean it keeps slipping out? So it was far from easy, because there were things that I would easily do that for him were an effort. He struggled with coming up with a menu and following a weekly menu. I would create weekly menus that I would send him. And he's like, I'm not like that. I feel what I think we want to eat like 2 hours before it's mealtime. I'm like, yeah, but if you have to defrost, if you have to like, so because he's very on the spot, it was hard, and his style is different from mine. And so for me to also step back and let him run the home the way that he thinks best was hard. And then our daughter started her menstrual cycle when I was away on deployment. Very heartbreaking, just not being there to hold your child, your baby, and talk her through and help her understand what was happening to her body. And again, God prepared Hannington, because he had grown up with girls, and he was able to intelligibly explain to her what was happening. Our son had a major accident and broke his arm while I was away. And so I remember looking at my phone like during a work meeting, and then there were pictures with him like in hospital I was like, oh my God, like I flipped. And at the time I had a Ugandan passport. And so it took me a while to get visas for each country that I deployed to, and I'd get single entry visas. So when I was on deployment, I would have to maximize. And sometimes I'd be out 1.5 months on full deployment, right? And just in touch with the family over phone. So that was very hard.
So you have a boy and a girl. People tend to suggest that, the boy will tend towards mommy because he already has the masculine side strong in him intuitively or naturally. And now mommy is missing, right? I think Ayinza, in this case, your girl, was lucky in the sense that the girls tend to naturally, age towards their fathers. What is the dynamic that is happening at home? Was Tendo expressing any discomfort around you being absent, or did Hannington really have things under control?
That's a great question. Our children struggled with the role reversal when we arrived in Jordan, because in Uganda, he was the main bread earner. I had a full-time job. We had help as we do back home. And so he didn't cook, didn't clean, he went for for the school meetings and did runs with them, but there were traditional roles that he didn't do. And so it took a bit for them to understand what was happening. The saving grace is Hannington is a strong communicator and he's a talker and he processes outwardly. And so whatever it was that was going on, he processes in real time, still does. And so we were all brought along on the journey for what was happening to him. From an identity perspective, it was also hard for him to get into the swing of things, because although we had talked about it, leaving it is different. When push comes to shove and you've got these things in front of you and you're cooking meals every day nonstop, it's unrelenting. That's hard. There isn't enough conversation that prepares you for that. Our son is very much like me. He's very compliant. If you say don't touch, he doesn't touch. And he doesn't question. He doesn't question. He's curious, but even the way he approaches curiosity is more like a suggestion. And are you open to exploring? He's just a bit like that. Our daughter is exactly like her father. Lives on the edge of life, questions everything, needs answers and needs logical answers, and is very black and white in the way she communicates. The saving grace for both of them is that because I was absent, they grew very close to their father. And the natural link and connection to the mother is usually always there. And I had been a stay-home mom for the earlier years of their lives, 4.5 years. And although I worked, I was very present. And so that helped. Whenever I was back from home, from work on deployment, I would take a lot of R&R, take leave, and try to make up for that time. And we prayed together as a family on phone while I was on deployment. And so there was those daily touch points. But I think the greatest outcome of this is Hannington has role modeled humility from a place of brokenness, because the traditional expectation of a man's role is something that's innate for him, having been raised in a traditional home, being an African, being surrounded by Africans, by family questions, the role reversal, and doesn't always fully understand it, but has come alongside us and has been very supportive. But our kids have watched him role model humility and priesthood and playing into one's strength and owning that identity and that work from a place of pride and gratitude and an understanding of the impact of the calling that you are in right here, right now. And I find that when I think about societal norms, you will have stay-home moms that will say, oh, my work is not valued and I'm not seen. And, I only cook, I only raise children. But I think it's that narrative that they carry in them that actually impacts sometimes the way they show up and the way that they're received. I've seen Hannington and I describe it as we're raising two nations.
Yeah.
And we have decided that to raise godly nations, we will make this investment.
Yeah.
And both of us can't be on the first lane, because then these nations will be left behind.
Yeah.
And so of the two of us, who do we think God is calling into that beauty?
Yeah.
And I also learned for myself to be grateful and to see it as a privilege, because sometimes you can become resentful for missing out on the play dates, on the jokes, on the college tours. As I just said, our recent debacle is the college tours.
Yeah.
And the strain on the brain and on the body of work, the politics, the strife, the drain, that you kind of feel like, what's the balance here? Like, I feel like I'm missing out on these things. And so we've understood that we've all been called for a time such as this, and all grace abounds in the callings that we have. And so finding joy and pride in, I don't just cook meals, I am feeding nations. I don't just clean a house, I'm providing the right environment for my family to thrive. And if not me, then who? And so that flip has been helpful for the children. And I know you asked me about kids, and I kind of did this. Yeah, but that's the modeling that I've seen our children actually take with them.
Talk to me a little bit about these labels or roles that men have been traditionally given, right? Provider versus leader. Do you feel that you are leading because you are the main breadwinner? In the context, we're still in Jordan, yeah, because the story will continue. But did you ever feel that you are leading the family simply because your paycheck was higher, or how did you play that dynamic?
Yeah, that's a great question. In preparing for this talk, I did a bit of reading, and I bumped into a survey. I don't know what audience was surveyed, but the question was, who should be the primary breadwinner? 60% of the audience said men, and 40% was undecided. There was no percentage that called onto the woman, right?
Mm.
So I thought that was interesting. Now, to your question about did I feel like I was so the way it plays out in our family is we've had a joint account from the time we started dating. So we dated for 2 years before we got married. And
Can you say that again? Just
yeah,
so
call
we
it
hear
foolish. Call it
from
foolish.
the time you started dating.
We opened up one bank account and we both got our salaries on this one bank account. And we now laugh about it. We're like, suppose we're broken up. What would have happened then? We're like, how would we have split it up? Like, but by God's grace, he put us in that mindset. We opened up a joint bank account with instructions that any can withdraw. We had this ATM cards and we had equal rights to the money. Little did we know that downstream, God was preparing us. And so we've kept one bank account throughout our lives, our marriage lives. And so the money all goes in one place. Currently, my husband we're still sorting out his right to work in the US, meaning he's not working. He's got full access to the money and can use it whichever way. The second piece is I don't attach to money and things as a person. I don't like going to the bank. I don't like engaging with banks and numbers. And so Hannington runs the full show. He deals with banks, mortgages, etc., the whole 9 yards. And so in preparing for this talk, I asked our kids to tell us a little bit of their reflection. And they're like, because dad takes care of everything financial, we don't even feel like, for us, there's no difference because we'll come to both of you and say, this is what we need. And you look at that and you'll be like, yeah, whatever. And then he will be like, yes, no, maybe later. He'll be making those decisions. And so that's really helped. The societal norms, I understand, being a traditional Ugandan African woman. And as a Christian, I also understand the societal norms. If you look at the book of Genesis, chapter 3, and see where the script starts from, that as God is cursing Abraham, he says, cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you'll eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground. So there's like a mandate there of provision, right?
Yeah.
Then when you go to Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22 to 24, it says, wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as you do to the Lord. For the Lord is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body. Now, this same Bible, same book, Ephesians chapter 5, later on, verse 25 says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy. So the husbands have the mandate to love the church, and the wife has the mandate to submit to the husband. Ephesians 5:21 says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. So this is just a mutual responsibility in marriage where both husband and wife are contributing to the family's well-being in complementary ways. Each one playing to their own strength. And then finally, if you look at Proverbs 31, it talks about the virtuous woman, right? And this virtuous woman is out there. She's working. She's toiling. We don't hear a whole detail about the husband and what role he's playing, if he's primary provider or not, but we're seeing a woman's contribution as vital and as valued. And so when I think about our society back in Uganda, and I think about the Bible being a very important baseline for me, I bring those together to say that it is indeed going against the grain. It's an unconventional calling. And a lot about a man's identity is strained by this journey.
Mm.
But when I've seen couples step back and look at the word of God and unpack it, and also look at the economic realities,
Mm.
the emphasis being where does it make more sense to lean more into, and how can we then play into each other's strengths and value what we each bring to the table, then I see that as a possibility.
And I think that's something that is so important to clarify, because God is the provider. Now I'm giving you my personal opinion as Aggie, as I was thinking about this conversation. I believe God is the provider, and the primary role of leadership, regardless of what the paycheck says, the primary role of leadership in a family belongs to the man, because that's where you see this: wives, submit to your husbands, and husbands, love as Jesus loved the church, because the way Jesus loves us is a leadership role that we can never, you know what I mean? We have to be surrendered. And sometimes I think when we look at that statement, we feel like, yeah, men should like bend over backwards and do everything and so on and so forth. But the flip side is also that as women, we have to have a surrender towards this man that God has put in our lives. And I think what makes your dynamic so special is that you are not only married on paper, and with the rings on the fingers, but that your money was married as well. Mm-hmm. And what's special is that you even did it while you were still dating, because I think that's where the friction for so many people comes from.
Yeah,
I would love for you to elaborate on the nations piece. Yeah, the fact that you call your children nations. I think, standing from the outside looking in now, I feel like that's such a visionary way of looking at family, which reduces your egos, because then it's not about you, Julie, and it's not about Hannington, but it's about this assignment that God has privileged you to steward, for as long as you are still able to be. Can you expound on that a little bit more? Because I think in some relationships there's too much of me, my career, my plans, that the vision as a family gets lost in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. Thank you, great question. And before I reflect back, I think when you were speaking, something that came up for me is our money is married, our values and hopes and dreams are also married.
Yeah.
Because if those worlds don't come together, there's strife.
Yeah.
And the expression quid pro quo came up for me. Scratch my back and I scratch yours. But that assumes that we both have the same length of nails. We know where to scratch and how to scratch, and we're able to scratch. I might feel that I'm scratching, but guess what? I don't have nails, so you don't feel the scratch.
Yeah.
What happens if I'm not able to scratch? So we've seen a good number of people for whom it feels really difficult, and the man is saying, I'm doing everything that I can to provide. The woman is saying it's not enough, or the reverse. Or the woman is saying, I'm raising children and this should count. And the husband is saying, the economic times are hard. We both need to work. And the woman is saying, but I'm trying to find a job and I'm not finding a job.
Yeah.
We also have friends for whom the money is split in the middle, like the man takes care of the mortgage, I take care of school fees, or I take care of groceries. Yeah, but what happens if one of you loses the job?
Yeah.
Then what, right? Because then it becomes, you're not doing your part, you're not carrying your fair share of the load. I'm also aware of the deep privilege that we had to be able to make a choice. There are people for whom this conversation is not a choice.
Yeah.
Perhaps that maybe the man fell ill or had an accident and is not able to work.
Yeah.
And so there's the pain and the burden and the sacrifice and the tears that come from mourning that on both sides, that the man can't provide the way he wants to, or that the woman is carrying a load that is untenable, feels untenable. So I'm also very aware that we've had that privilege of choice. And so my appeal goes out to young people, maybe people that are not yet married, not yet dating, or are dating, that you probably have some leeway to start talking and making some choices and drawing lines in the sand, because God will bless you, because these opportunities will come. It's not a question of if, they will come. And if you haven't done the foundational pieces, the foundational questions, conversations and prayers, and Lord, what's your scripture for us to hold on to? It becomes difficult to make those choices once that rosy opportunity is placed before you. So sorry, I kind of got sidetracked, but you said something that kind of triggered that in my head. And your question was about the nations. Yes, we look back in Bible times, and if you look at each person in the Bible, if you think about Abraham and Isaac being born, you need one person to propagate the next family and the next families, right? So our son, one as he is, our daughter, one as she is, by God's grace, they will one day go on to get married. And if God blesses them with children, those children will get married and they will have children. And so character formation is done in real time.
Yeah.
I've seen families where both husband and wife work very hard. They need to. And I don't hold judgment for that. And there's a nanny back home that's raising the children. How the nanny goes about discipline, discipleship, even that word, if it exists, will probably be different from how the father, mother would go about it. And so for us in coming together to make this choice, we knew that discipleship and disciplining happens in real time. It happens in what you model on a day-to-day, that your children are able to see you pray. Your children are able to see you say, in this home, we love visitors. We encourage people to come. We celebrate guests. Like, those things are not taught, they're caught.
Yeah.
These nations, like, if we want to see responsible nations that will be submissive to government and to rules and to regulations and will contribute sensibly and responsibly to other physical nations, the discipleship starts at home and the mandate from the father and the mother. So that's where we come from when we say we're raising nations, because that's what every family is, whether they know it or they don't. They're raising nations. So what kind of nation are you raising in your home?
What do you do for Hannington to say thank you for, carrying that beat a little bit more than you are able to?
That's a good question. I think we thank each other.
Yeah, right.
We thank each other because we were realizing that we're playing in each other's strengths, and it takes two to tango. I'm also a very present mom. So from a logistical perspective, I do all meals and cleaning for the weekend. So I'm on weekend duty, and Hannington does Monday to Friday. When I cook on Sunday, I do a bit of bulk cooking. So he really does cook around Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, because we'll have like leftovers, and we eat leftovers in our house. I know homes for which that's not an option. We'll do leftovers Monday, Tuesday, and then he'll cook 3 or 4 times a week. And then we're both really, really present with the children and have independent relationships with each other's children. And so when it comes to thanking, there's a recognition of it takes two. You go out, you bring the money that makes it possible for us to do these things, but you're also doing your pieces, things that I absolutely love to do. I don't feel it a burden that over the weekend I get to cook, I get to clean. It's an honor and a privilege to be part of this raising of nations and giving Hannington time off to rest as well. Yeah, and I think just verbalizing. So our love languages, what do I do to thank him? So he's got his love languages, I've got my love languages. His love language is quality time and physical touch. So very much hold my hand and let us stare into the stars. And I am very much words of affirmation and action, helpful actions. So if you think about the far end, we are as far end as can be, because I'm high energy and very much clean, let's move around and like kind of move things. That's how I express my love. And the way he expresses his love is just want to hold my hand and stare into the stars. So for me to continuously step back and say, yes, I know that I want to clean up the house, because then on Monday you'll have a clean house, you'll have less to do. and understand that actually he wants to hold my hands and just really stare at the stars. It's hard, but the more that I lean into that, the more he knows that I can see him and I celebrate him. And so that's part of what we do. We try to speak each other's love language.
That's lovely. So I have another question, but I'll pack it for a later station. So we're in Jordan now. What happens after Jordan?
Yeah, so after Jordan, towards the end of Jordan, funny story, I was in Syria, and there's a lot happening on the home front, the work front, and I was like, I can't do this. So when I went back home and went on R&R, the company would give you 5 days of R&R and give you a chunk of, pay for tickets or whatever. So we went off on a holiday, and I watched myself grab my laptop and sneak it into my rucksack, but like a thief. I looked around, like literally looked around to make sure the kids and Hannington were not seeing. We get to the hotel. I say, let me go take a shower. I run the shower and keep it running so that I can open my laptop. When you open your laptop and it makes that little sound?
Yeah.
I didn't want them to hear that dreaded sound.
Yeah.
Because I was right in the middle of an evacuation.
Mm.
And I knew that Hannington, the kids would be devastated to see that laptop follow us after I had been off on deployment.
Mm.
And so I opened my laptop and I start to work. And in that moment, I paused. I remembered how I snapped my laptop into the rucksack like a thief, like looking around, making sure it's. And then right here, I'm pretending to have a shower when I'm actually in my computer responding. And I said, no, I don't want to be remembered like this.
Mm.
This is not the legacy that I want for myself and for the children. And I'm really living a lie. So there, I was like, this is it. I'm resigning. So that resignation led to job interviews in the UK. So then I got a job in London. And so we moved off to London for 8 years. And when we got there, it was easier culturally, I guess. And the system, Uganda being from a British colony, like the education system and driving on the other side of the road and like convenience, and it was so much easier. And Hannington had a full right to work. He didn't have to just do consultancies. And so he got a job, but he got a 4-day work job again, so that he would be available to the family. And he took a mid-level role. He's as smart as a whistle. He's really, really smart, but he's made a cautious decision to take lower roles so that he could get the family through transition, through change, and just really be availed to us as needed. So that was London for 8 years. And then last year, July, we moved to New York. Again, a job transfer with the same company. Okay,
so a lot of people think about resigning their jobs, but that's where it stops. They just think and then keep thinking. How did you have the guts to just go like, I'm done, and that's it, And what did the conversation with Hannington look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was done. You made a point at some point during this conversation where you said, ultimately, God is the provider. We have always known that ultimately God is our provider. These jobs are one way that he will provide. Yeah. The other ways God provides by keeping trouble away from us, by keeping sickness and disease, so we're not investing in hospital bills, that people come to your house and show up with a truckload of food. And my parents used to show up when I was a stay-at-home mom, would like come from the farm and here's food, and would have like our food sorted for a month. God is our ultimate provider.
Yeah.
Secondly, the countries that we go into, I see that as God's legal way of getting us into geographies for a much bigger mission. So for me, I have a clear calling in the workplace. There's ministry there. There's ministry in our neighborhood. There's ministry in our local church. There's ministry everywhere we go. And so we're both, and the children, very, very aware that these jobs and opportunities are just to get us. It's like a legal way to get us to the countries, and the mission is much bigger. And so the decision to leave the job was made easy because we acknowledge that God is our ultimate provider. We acknowledge that times and seasons belong to God. And so the time and season here has ended. We felt the restlessness in our spirits. I talked about abiding in the vine. I talked about hearing the shepherd's voice.
Yeah.
You start to sense something. You start to sense an end and a beginning, right? So from a spiritual perspective, there was that. And then when your job doesn't bring you joy anymore, and you find that you're grumbling a lot more than you should, and your stomach is up in knots all the time. Now, work is intense anywhere you go. So I'm not saying the stomach equation is what should make people resign. But there are times where you feel that you're constantly complaining, constantly unhappy and low energy, and you're not contributing in ways that you should. So I've always said to Hannington, keep me real. If you see me, don't let me go too far down the road. If you see me tending in that direction, call me out, hold a mirror. So thankfully, I wasn't far gone, but I could begin to start feeling like the pressure of always being away from home, always being on deployment. The joy of working in a job that I love so dearly was slowly seeping out. So Janet made it possible for us to make the call.
Wow. Takes trust.
Yeah.
It's trust in God, yeah.
It does.
Tell me about your husband's self-esteem during this season. And maybe also the current season, especially because if I heard you correctly, you're still working out if he can or cannot work. So this is from July last year.
Yeah.
It's already quite a number of months, right? Already like 10 months in.
Yeah.
How is he feeling in his heart and spirit? Is this because this is a number in German they say a number too high. Like it's a little bit more than the previous situations where he could still do consultancies and work 4-day weeks and so on.
Yeah. It's a great question. And I think that in preparing for this conversation, I struggled with how vulnerable I wanted to be. But I also know that Christians, we like talking about things after the victories have happened. And you're talking about that time when, like it's all in the past and this is where we are now. I also had to sit down with him and, kind of process, not because I wasn't fully aware of the emotion around the current season, but to get language that reflects what it's like for him. With each country that we went to, we knew it would take about 6 to 8 months for us to settle in. And so we'd always given ourselves that as the acceptable timeline. Finding a house, a bank, a school, a routine, a car, community, church, it takes a while. Yeah. And with me being deployed or, once you get a job, like employers don't care about everything else that's happening in your life, that you're settling in, that you get, it's like you hit the road running. I don't like that expression, but there you go. You have to perform, you show up and you've got a window to prove that you're the right hire or that, you're able to add at a strategic level sensibly. So our understanding was you go focus on the job. I get everything else set in place. And then also in the past, our children were younger. And so it's intense even after the 8 months. There's school drop-offs, there's activities, there's, soccer, dance. We're in a different season. Our son is at university. He doesn't live with us, he lives in the UK. Our daughter is in her last year of high school. So next year will technically be empty nesters. For real, will be gone. And so the feeling needed that Hannington went through in prior years, that's not there now because everybody's independent. Even our daughter who's in high school, she walks to school. It's 10 minutes walk away. She's got her friends. They've got cars. They pick her, they drop her. And so for someone who took value and delight and identity in this is how I support the family, that has been redefined where we find ourselves. And also rights to work, they take quite a time in the US. So it's been tough. I've noticed one of the hard conversations we had to have a few months ago was, when I finish my workday, we have dinner at 5. I try to finish work at 5 and then we have dinner and then You're
working from home, right? Because that's the only way this timeline can work.
Yeah. I go into the office, every now and then, but I predominantly work from home. And then Hannington will ask at 5 o'clock while we're having dinner, how was your day? And because I'm extremely tired, I will say, fine, okay, comme ci, comme ça. I'll give him a short answer. And then he'll try to push a little bit more for detail. And I will become a bit resentful or kind of rush through quickly, don't want to talk about it, how was your day? And Hannington was like, I'm actually struggling with this because I've had a day that has not been mentally challenging. And here you are. I want to live vicariously through your life. I want to understand what your day was like. In a sense, without him saying it, I want to unpack and help you solve your life's problems because he's a fixer. husbands are fixers. Like, what is it that's bothering you? Like, and he's smart and he has a lot that he offers me great counsel, right? And then I remember thinking about it and saying, actually, I don't like to talk about work because I find in myself that I relive my day, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then that sets the motion for the evening and the night, because then when I sleep, my brain will still be doing this race. And so we had to talk about that. And that was hard because we both had very strong positions about it. He had a clear need. You've been away the whole day. I'm interested. I want to know how you are. I can see you're tired and you're broken. I want to talk that through. And I'm like, I don't want to talk about it because I'm going to have to relieve everything and I want rest for the following day. And so I think where we landed is still give him enough to work with and be patient with him, but also him understanding my need to unwind and feel fully refreshed. So the current journey is not easy. And the way we're going about it is we have community. We have friends that have known us for years that have continued to walk with us and are praying with us. Hannington has a few trusted men that he speaks with and able to get counsel. He's volunteered in our local church where he's now running a Bible study. But it's not easy. And I'm beginning to find a few trusted friends that I'm also processing this with, because this we've not seen before, where we don't have children that are needy, and where getting the right to work is taking longer than we had anticipated. It's on the deadline, but it's taking longer. So it's a work in progress.
It feels like a nice way to slide into intimacy. So I'm going to take you a little bit back to the time when you were a stay-home mom and how you guys intimately related with each other, because that was the reverse situation of what's happening right now. Did you have the same urge to know about how his day was and how was he, feeding into that, and how is that working out now from an intimacy perspective, like the hugs and the kisses and the hold my hand and let's look at the stars? How's that playing out?
Yeah. So those love languages for us have remained exactly that. I think I was once a part of a Bible study group where we're talking about, do these evolve over time, especially after children, menopause, I'm approaching menopause, like how do these change and how does this expression play out? Our love languages have remained exactly that. And when I was a stay-home mom, I had more energy and mental availability to hold hands and stare at the stars. Also because I had a well-oiled machine that I was running at home. I had the kids and the food and the house. Like I'm good at that stuff. So I kind of had that going. So I felt that was easier for me to show up in those ways. It's become harder with more demands on me intellectually, and for a woman, how it takes a while for our minds to rest, to relax, and to get into that whole motion of I'm present, I'm wanted, and I want you, and letting that live out as it could. The scripture that we continue, and it's a life conversation in our home. It's not something we've mastered, and we talk about it a lot because there's seasons when it's harder to be intimate and in ways that are meaningful for the other party. And so the scripture in Hebrews 13:4 that says marriage should be honored by all and the marriage bed kept pure is important. In the decision to move together across countries, it has been in bid for that. Thankfully, my current job has less travel, so I'm a lot more physically at home. And the scripture in Genesis 2:24 that says, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall be one flesh. It talks about one flesh, but also under the one flesh is holding fast to creating shared dreams, ambitions, giftings, leaving behind what was modeled, what was modeled that didn't work, and then thinking about what was modeled that works. Our parents were not physically openly affectionate to each other, right? We're a different generation, we're raising nations. How are we modeling that? And so I think I would say it's more conversation now, more communication, because the expression of intimacy is sometimes harder. Creating room and space for understanding and forgiveness is something that we're also leaning more into for those reasons.
Wow. I like the fact that you're working from home. So at least there's, moments more than when you were having to travel away a month or so. One more question. It's been 10 years, if I counted correctly, right? Between Jordan, the UK, and now New York. What are the people around you saying, and specifically the in-laws? So, for example, Hannington's family, because maybe they thought with Jordan it's a stint for just 1 year and soon he will be back in his, leading role and so on. But it's been 10 years of this dynamic. Do they perhaps feel like you're emasculating him? Do you get any passive aggression? Because, in Africa, when we can't really understand the problem, we send a vibe, yeah? We don't...
we don't talk about it, we just send vibes. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I'll start with my side of the family. My parents have always been good, deep listeners, and they processed the decision for me to be a stay-at-home mom. They listened deeply, and they said, if Hannington is comfortable with this, if you're making such changes, you've got our blessing. And they supported us. I talked about shopping and bringing food from the farm, right? They supported us. It was like family gatherings where you're expected to all raise money, as we usually is the case. They kind of protected us. They knew we were living on one income. And so I'm forever grateful to my parents who have done that for us. And they have a deep appreciation for Hannington because they know that I'm able to thrive in the workplace because of the role he plays. And so they do celebrate him deeply and express their gratitude. My in-laws, because we've had an open relationship with money, where he is making decisions, I'm making decisions. So the way we do it is I take care of my family, he takes care of his family. In as far as when the requests come in, right? My family doesn't go and ask him for stuff. His family doesn't come and ask me for stuff. They go to him and he comes to me and says, hey, this is what's on the table. What shall we do? Like, do we lean in? Do we not? So that's how it works. And so his family has not experienced a dynamic because to them, their son is able to, their children, myself and Hannington, are able to provide where we're able to provide. We engage the way we engage. I think this current stint is what's been hardest, especially for my mother-in-law, because we've been open to them as to where we're at as a family, and they're sympathetic for that. But in as far as demeaning him or seeing him any less because of our unconventional roles, no. And he's always been different. That's the other thing. He's always been a different type of child. And so it's not unbecoming that he married an unconventional woman and they live an unconventional life. So it's as if also God had gone ahead to prepare them mentally for what our marriage would bring to them.
And your children, do they sometimes have moments where you feel like, do we need to change the dynamic or?
No, interestingly. And I asked both of them separately ahead of this interview to see if I was truly in touch with how they feel about this. And Tendo, our son, says that when he tells his friends about the unconventional structure we have, they're always like, what? Like, how does that actually feel? Like, tell us, like, what does that feel like living in your household? And it's like, actually, it doesn't feel like anything. Like, our dad is busy. He's got things to do. We come together at mealtime. We know that if we need quick answers and someone available for us to troubleshoot, it's dad. Emergency numbers are dad. Like usually it's mothers that are like the school, like emergency. It's like always dad. And if they're filling in forms, they'll put his name as the emergency contact because they know it will take a while for me to see my phone. Sometimes I won't be able to pick calls because I'm on a meeting. And so they say if anything, our daughter was saying that my husband has really set a high standard for her on what to look out for a match. She's like, I need humility and an ability to be able to know that we can play in each other's strengths, and our son as well, that, should God bless me with a wife and with children and a structure where I have to lean in more and raise the family, I don't have an ego around it because I've seen how dad is able to lean in. It's not all rainbows. Yeah. But even where the pain is, he has processed with us and we're able to kind of lean in and say, yes, when things get rough, I won't say dad painted the perfect picture. Why am I struggling to ace it, as it were? Yeah.
Do you feel that your success puts pressure on your girl? in the sense that in two ways. One, that she perhaps also has to like somewhere at some point start from your shoulders upwards. But secondly, that it will affect the kind of partner she chooses, that she maybe subconsciously will feel like she's the one to provide for the family.
That's a very interesting question. I don't know. I don't know. What I know is she's very talented and very smart. And we've tried to communicate that we will support the calling and the giftings on their lives. And I'm hoping that that releases her for whatever way that expresses itself. We've also gone down to define what success is. Success is not measured by title, role, position, seniority. It starts with character, who you are behind closed doors. And we've said to them, if you can ace that, if you can focus on character, that's success. So I'm hoping that that releases both of them.
Julie, my last question or bit here is, a lot of people prepare for the wedding and not so much for the marriage, which is why today divorce, which is something that was hardly ever discussed at in the generation of our parents, has become so rampant. Like, I'm shocked at how people pull us all together and then we put all the resources and all the meetings and everything, and 1 year in, they're like, sorry, it's not working, we have to break up. Can you say something to young Christian couples that have the hopes to be married, have no idea how it's going to play out, because I'm sure you didn't see this one coming, but it came and you've somehow navigated through it? Give them a help box or a toolbox or something, some off the top of your heart. I want to say off the top of your heart, things that they can think about to help them navigate, because marriage is full of surprises. In this case, we're talking about difference in earnings, but it could be, I don't know, birthing a disabled child or not getting children. You don't know what types of challenges come out there, but with Christ at the center, 3 to 5 things that they can take away.
Thank you very much, Aggie. And again, thank you for inviting me. I'm deeply, deeply honored, because again, this is a journey not of perfection, but of figuring things out as God has enabled us. And we continue on this journey, right? Our nations will continue to be nations in mentorship and discipleship for, as long as they live. And so we continue on this journey. I would say to young people a few things. One is, it starts with me. It starts with you. I say again, abiding in the vine, knowing the shepherd's voice. God gives us daily bread. He has a fresh word for each day. And he has interpretation and revelation unique to you and to your circumstances, unique to the way you've been put together. And so it starts with you understanding what your spiritual gifts are, what your passions are, what your abilities are, what your personality is, and the experiences that have led you to today and how that's preparing you for the future. God brings that all together. So that's the first. It starts with you abiding in the vine. The second is the power of community. The power of community. Hannington and I have stuck in community, and we're firm believers of the word in Jeremiah 29 that, wherever he plants you, plant vineyards, give children in marriage, build homes, settle, build community where God has planted you. Community used to be Uganda, then it became Jonah, then it became UK, then it became US. In every place we have gone, we have tried to build a community around us, invested in people. And these are people that have walked alongside us, people that have prayed with us. If Hannington and I are in crisis, our friends back in Uganda might be asleep, right? We're not going to call them to process, but there'll be someone in our community, in our neighborhood, that we can say, hey, can we come over, or can we have a chat and, get that support that we need? So invest in community. And in investing in community is thinking about who's mentoring you and who are you mentoring. It's not just being a recipient, it's also pouring out, right? The Dead Sea is the Dead Sea because it doesn't have an outlet, right? And so that as surely as you're receiving, you also have a young person that you're walking alongside and you're pouring into. And so that's community. The third piece is the power of seeking. So once more under community is that community also for me spells out the importance of counseling and therapy and coaching. Hannington and I have leaned into counseling, therapy, and coaching, all three, throughout our 23 years, because unpacking who we are, our own brokenness, and how that comes together, sometimes reaching out to a third party to support, a third trusted person to mediate difficult conversations is really important. So that's within the community bucket. And then the final piece is really also as part of abiding in the vine is the place of prayer and reflection, that you're constantly pursuing a relationship with God. That as you pursue a relationship with God, your character is being transformed, is being refined. Hannington and I separately pursue God, and then we come together and pursue God as a couple, as a family. Because you see, when we can come to a place where the road gets tough, then it bends. Sometimes it will boil down to what's your conviction? What is God saying to you as Julie? What is God saying to you as Hannington? And then we come together and leave that out in shared worship. And so that would be my advice to a young couple.
I can't help myself. Thank you. But I can't help myself but ask two more questions, because I know from previous conversations I've had on the channel that these are things that really are a struggle for several people. On the community piece, a lot of people do not know who to turn to because trust gets broken all the time. They don't feel safe to share their vulnerabilities because they then hear it down the vineyard somewhere. Or some people in Uganda, for example, they say, "Oh, abantu tebagaliza." Translated, people don't wish each other well. So you almost feel like people will glory in your failings or your shortcomings or your hardships, right? Which makes people keep everything inside. How can we build safe spaces responsibly?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when Hannington and I have been blessed to be part of church leadership, and so be tasked or have the privilege and honor of working alongside other couples. And when we do that, we try to be clear to both couples, both partners in the relationship, how we are contracting to work together. If I'm working with a woman and Hannington's working with a man, like, we're having these conversations. Are you comfortable with me sharing with Hannington? Hannington's asking, are you comfortable with me sharing with Julie? So that it's known and understood. And if they don't feel comfortable, they say why. And then we find ways to. So there's something about church leadership structures, who's in those positions, and the rules of the game, so to speak. And I don't know if that's quite your question, so I'll put that in one place. And then the other place I found for myself that when we've opened up with people, it's taken a while for us to get to the place where we're like, these are the people we want to work with, right? So by the time we open up, we understand who these people are. And also, Aggie, I think to myself, what's the worst that can happen? Now, it's painful when you hear something that you've shared in confidence, shared elsewhere. But if it's going to bring me deliverance and relief in the first place, being held back by the fear of it being reported takes away from that deliverance that I could get from that conversation. And so I hold things lightly. And so I've told you I'm struggling, and then it's shared in other circles that Julie is struggling. Then what? Like, so what? Who doesn't struggle? So there's also something of people that over-index on that fear. And I think the enemy uses that fear to hold people back from good work they could be doing through counseling and therapy. But also sometimes people tell themselves that as a lie or as a way to hold back from doing the heavy work that comes with counseling, therapy, and coaching. It's very heavy work. And someone has to be ready to take it on. So I think sometimes when people are not ready to do that, they'll step back and say, people can't be trusted. And it's true. You hear these things in circles that shouldn't, but there's also a lot that remains behind closed doors. So why would you index on the one thing that goes out and not a million things that don't go out? So I kind of play it out that way.
Perspective, yeah. It's perspective. The last one is on therapy, because I have experienced, I go to therapy regularly. I'm blessed to live in a country that, I can access these kinds of services easily. So both from a professional perspective and privately, I go to therapy to process different kinds of things. But my observation has been that Christians feel like therapy is a secular thing. And a lot of them feel like they would rather tend towards prayer only. So as a matured Christian, tell us where prayer meets therapy and what the extra benefit of leveraging therapy is?
It's a great question.
I promise you that's my last question.
It's a great question. We've got Christian therapists, thank God. So there's that easy answer. Great Christian therapists that bring it together. I remember once working with a Christian therapist who actually used, oh my God, I'm blanking out on the tool. Let's back that, not important. So
you can send it to me later and I'll
find the word and send it to you. So there's that pillar. Therapists have gone to school for many years, and it's a specialty that takes years and technique and books to understand. They do a messy job because they open up like your life, windows, traumas, wounds, which we all carry, and they have the job of walking alongside you to hopefully get to healing and then close those wounds. Now, if you look at prayer on the side, a pastor coming alongside you to pray for you, wonderful, great. Sometimes it goes beyond prayer, and we need to open those wounds. We need to talk about those traumas. We need to process using technical skills. So a pastor praying for you may not be able to do this, and a therapist that doesn't pray will also not point you to God. And so I see a world where you can work with both, or if you have the privilege of working with a Christian therapist, you have it all together. One.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, the technical aspect is something that a lot of people underestimate, but it's quite powerful. Julie, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I have been toying with the idea together with you around eventually getting the privilege of hosting Hannington to get his side of the story. So please scratch the surface, have the conversation, and let me know what to
back. Quid pro quo. Thank you, Aggie. I'll circle back. And again, it was such a privilege to spend time with you. God bless you. You carry an interesting ministry that's much needed for our world. So God bless you.
Thank you so much. And I want to, again, thank you so much for having lived your life the way that you lived it. I wouldn't be born again if it wasn't for you and faith. You never knew, right? And that's the thing that we all have to think about, that we sometimes win souls not by preaching, but by simply living our lives with integrity and beauty. And you did that. And I want to say thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Take care.
So if you ever feel discouraged, remember this nation that you
are a nation in every way. See the nations you're touching with your talk show. God bless you.
Bless you too. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.